So thank you again for joining us for our MIC monthly meditation. We're so pleased to have with us a longtime friend of the Marin Interfaith Council, Rabbi Henry Shreibman. He's a professor at CSU Sonoma State, where he studied and developed their Jewish Studies program beginning in 2009 and continues to teach undergraduates. He's also served on faculty at UC Davis for 3 years in religion and history. March 2013, he was listed among America's most inspiring rabbis by the Jewish Daily Forward. In 2008, he was awarded the Teacher of the Year at Dominican University as an adjunct professor, nominated again 5 times for Teacher of the Year between 2009 and 2018 as a full-time professor, received Faculty Advisor of the Year, Excellence in Diversity Award in spring 2018. He earned a PhD, Master in Philosophy and MA from Columbia University, New York in Comparative Ancient Religions and Literatures. And he's an ordained rabbi since 1981 from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has much more in his bio that you can read in the announcement that went out. We're just thrilled to have you back with us, Rabbi Henry. We adore you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think you're on mute.
Okay, hi. I had a colleague from Dominican call me today with her regrets that she couldn't come. And she said they must have made a terrible mistake. You've been with the Interfaith Council since '92. And somebody should have figured out you actually don't meditate. So I actually don't meditate. Although if you noticed in the reference to tonight's meditation, I quoted the Psalms. And there is a form of Jewish meditation. And that is, it says, Uvahem nehege, and upon those words of learning Torah, nehege, you should meditate, yomam valayla, day and night, which means, if you've had any exposure to Bible, which I bet you all do, it means day, night, and everything in between, right? God created heaven and earth, everything in between. It's referred to as a merism. So what motivated me when I was contacted, and I want to thank Esmeralda and Scott for their wonderful welcoming back, what came to my mind is that what's occupied just about everybody on our planet has been a combination of terrible disruption, illness, and now we've got a war that we recognize. So as opposed to being faint-hearted, I thought I would put together a conversation, which as Scott sees fit. Maybe you'll have comments midterm, but I'll move through it and ask for comments, in which case maybe you can unmute the crew. I wanted to look at the issue of prayer for all of us when we are approached by 2 of the worst maladies of being human. If existential loneliness comes from watching somebody else's war, and then you project yourself into it, or existential identification, you see somebody else in a war and you project yourself into it. War gives us that merism. We're caught between projecting ourselves in and looking at the gross inequity of random death, of viciousness, and, to be perfectly blunt, the darkest side of being human. So war isn't just about the events, because right now, some of you know that I taught ethics at Dominican for an awfully long time. I always check in, how many wars are there every month or so? And we're right around 40 or 50 wars right now. But there's one war that's on your mind, and that is worth meditating about. Why does this war seem to echo inside our lives in the West. In the West, this is a war that we get. The same countries that are antagonists and protagonists 5 years ago rejected refugees. Remember Syria? Same quotes that you and I hear right now about refugees being the worst since the war, the Second World War. Well, you can't keep saying that if you continue to have a refugee problem, yet this refugee problem, this part of the world is being responsive to, as opposed to putting up gates and barriers where people were again referencing the Second World War. So here's what I had in mind, a sort of contemplation. For those of you who know me or have heard me, I'm usually like a fast East Coast train. This is the end of the day. It's calmer. Birds are at rest. Even I come to rest. So I wanted to share some of these reflections with you. Here's one from Tehillim. My working hypothesis is that when there's a war that you and I recognize, that penetrates us, that finds a way into our own worst fears and greatest hopes, that in those moments, we become soul sick. There's a soul sickness I have. I'm not going to project it on you. But things don't feel right. And there are other times things don't feel right. But what we can do is meditate and reflect upon different components of how the ancients, our predecessors in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam in particular, reflected on war. So when one feels soul sick in Jewish life and culture, you go to Tehillim or the Psalms, because these are the personal prayers of some authors or some wisdom phrases that have been floating around for probably over 3,000 or 4,000 years. And then they get edited in. So an interesting phrase crossed my mind. Search for peace and pursue it. War finds us, but we have to search for peace. That, by the way, is what the synagogue that you and I know, Rodef Shalom, means pursue peace. You've got to search for it. War unfolds. We watch NATO, we're watching our own country. We're moved by this war. Other wars we're not moved by. This one we're moved by. 70% of our country are ready to go, go, go. But you have to pursue peace. You don't have to convince people too hard to fight. You can see how quickly this turned around. We'll have a chance to discuss some of these. We'll go back as you wish. There's another harsh reality. I've often said that Judaism and Christianity are so similar, but then they depart because Christianity captures a certain idealism and Judaism continues with a rugged realism. That rugged realism, I would make the argument, you can feel a little bit in Islam as well. So maybe you have Judaism and Islam here and Christianity more ideal, because in Ecclesiastes, as I said, where do you go when you're soul sick? Tehillim, the Psalms, and I'll be glad to prescribe some. There's some I'm using right now, and wisdom literature, Ecclesiastes in the final section of the Tanakh. And there, you know chapter 3 by heart. You could sing it. There's a time for love, a time for hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And to this day, I can't tell you if the authors of this magnificent piece, it's truly magnificent, it has Very little to do with the rest of Ecclesiastes. It's a freestanding unit, sort of like a 10 Commandments of ethical relativism, or perhaps a rugged reality, or an actual call that there is a time for peace when you want to do war, and there's a time for war when you want to do peace. Very powerful. I'll keep quiet for a moment. Another place one can go is into rabbinic midrash. Most of you who have been raised in Christianity know that Jesus speaks in parables. Well, the word parable is basically midrash, a teaching tale, a fable. The rabbis had an opportunity to wave their hands, make interesting analogies, allegorical leaps. So here's one of those, and it's in the Babylonian Talmud, much bigger than the Jerusalem Talmud, by the way. So it goes something like this. So when the Egyptian army drowned in the Reed Sea, Yam Suf in Hebrew, God said to the other angels, my creations are drowning in the sea, and you are singing songs? Because the angels were cheering, apparently, for the Israelites. So the play within the play of this piece of Talmud is very clear. God doesn't want to take sides. God doesn't want the angels to take sides. Yet you know that from every war movie we've been in and every battle scene you've lived in your own personal life, you've been exposed to war. You know that you're constantly praying for the well-being of those on your side. And that opens the question, when you and I meditate and reflect and contemplate war and peace, what's our job if you're not in the scene itself? Here's another piece. Again, the core phrase is found in Psalms, and the commentary is in the Talmud. When God asked the angels' opinion about creating man, humanity, they objected. So the scene set by the Sanhedrin, the Talmud, the rabbis thinking creatively, they say the angels were brought into the discussion. Should we create humans? And by the way, that's a very famous riff, if you will, and there are probably 100 answers to why were humans created. Existential loneliness is not few among them. So what? The Talmud goes on to say they were troubled by a creation that is a mix between two worlds. It's a rabbinic concept. You don't mix things that don't belong mixed together. Meat and milk, you don't mix them together. One represents birth, one represents adult death. You don't do that. You don't, these are minor points, but for example, a talit is made of one fabric, wool or silk. You don't mix fabrics. It's very interesting. They're way ahead of themselves. And then the angels turn back and say, this is the problem of the two worlds. If you create a human, they're enlightened like us as angels, but they can be cruel like beasts. And war exposes both of those. It occurred to me that this little piece is sort of a rabbinic riddle, so that when you and I meditate and reflect on war and the soul sickness that we feel, you also have to think about leadership and power. And the rabbis had over 200 years to think about Roman power, preceded by 300 years of Greek power, preceded by several hundred years of Persian power, So they had a lot of time to think about power while they were being suppressed by the power. And they had a way of a turn of phrase: the greater the person, the greater the evil inclination. The greater the power that a leader has, the more that it has a tendency to go to the dark side, the bestial side, the aggressive side. So when we see a great person, I'm hard pressed to remember, but this is a crew that knows this. John Kennedy was ready to get into a full-fledged war with Russia and played brinksmanship. The greater the person, the greater the yetzer, the tendency that we have. We have. In Judaism, it doesn't have a devil pulling you one way and an angel in another. All of that is freely embedded. And in fact, the rabbis, we just had Ash Wednesday, the rabbis identified this part of the body as essential for prayer and essential for faith and essential for ethics. And they're aware that the back of the head also has importance for respiration, perspiration. They knew a lot, and therefore they created a prayer garment that touches here and touches there. The inclination is brought out the greater our visibility and power. It is woven in. That's what made the angels cry up here and up there. You and I have heard about just war theory, and we usually hear about it with Augustine in mind in the 400s of this era. But it preceded him. He was working from Roman theory, and Roman theory of a just war was pretty straightforward. Repel an invasion, and there the Hebrew Bible agrees. Retaliation for a wrong, the Hebrew Bible agrees. A breach of treaty. These are the Romans. Breach of treaty. And you can see that even in that time, what we use in the West is Augustine's rendition. But look at this rugged reality, a reasonable chance for success. And throughout this war that has our focus now in Ukraine, it seems as though one side thought it was going to succeed. That's why this came to my head immediately. The Romans didn't have that. They didn't have that component of the jus ad bellum, the justice to make the war. And it occurred to me, what gives us soul sickness is collateral damage. And the Hebrew Bible has a vignette where, again, the religious figure speaks truth to power. Moses does that, and Abraham sets the stage for that, talking back to God. So God says, I'm going to wipe out something that is really evil. And Abraham starts bargaining with him from 50, not telling you anything you don't know. If there are 50 righteous people in the city, are you really going to sweep away those who are righteous and the wicked? Here's the ethical call, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. And then he starts smearing God. Far be it from you, being the judge of all earth, and would you do that? And then with a snicker on his face, God goes, okay, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. And there were 10 rotten people. But it shows a great consideration for collateral damage. And that's at least a 3,000-year-old vignette. In daily Jewish prayer, You're told to thank God for giving pokeach ivrim, giving sight to the blind. It's a daily prayer. Thank God for clothing the naked. Thank God for releasing prisoners, straightening up those who are bent over. And when I saw the refugees fleeing, first in 10,000, then 20, then 50, and you saw where this was headed. Notice that in this prayer, with maybe 20 other phrases, several of them have to do with the impact of war. And when I've read this prayer historically, I'm thanking God, but it's also a reminder that if we're made in God's image, it isn't because we're all powerful or all knowing or always making the right decisions. It's because we become responsible for straightening up those who are bent down and releasing prisoners and clothing the naked and giving sight to the blind. We are the co-creator in prayers like this. I'm going to skip that one. Some things are worth fighting for. There's a key series of prayers in the daily prayer book. 18, it's called the Shemona Esrei, the 18 prayers. And interestingly, the 10th one is about freedom, cherut, freedom. So I'm going to read this to you because it just seems so pertinent. I wrote this 35 years ago with other wars in mind. You don't know freedom is gone until you've lost it. And by then, you're just another slave. Laugh at another's freedom lost, and before long, you'll be in the same place. Let's remember, when one person loses his or her freedom, we all lose a lot. And I echo in the bottom a sort of rabbinic riddle again. The bird in the cage says, "You see my food? What you don't see is my captivity, my lack of freedom." So this prayer, probably written during the Roman occupation, is a signal that freedom is worth fighting for when you're feeling soul sick. The rabbis go right next to this prayer, the 11th prayer. In other words, you have a little series, 10, 11, 12 out of 18, and it seems to hit to the heart of the problem. What you and I might do in the time of war is pray for good leadership. Can we liberate the people so someone can read this? I think it's large enough for somebody to read, other than my repetitive voice. Can somebody signal Scott if you want to read this out loud prayerfully?
You can unmute yourselves if there's someone who, there we go.
Mark, go ahead.
Mark, please.
Here we go. I can expand this on my screen. It says, and I'm appreciating this so much. This is hitting me. I am soul sick. We are all leaders in our world of school and in the world of adults. There are people who sometimes help make things better with solutions. And there are people who sometimes make things not work at all. Those are problems. May I be a person who works to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. Then I will be a true leader.
Thank you. And this is the formal prayer that is said. This is sort of what I felt was at the core of it that would help children and adults think a little about it. But look what it says: return our leaders as of before, and to our good advisors as they once were. In other words, this prayer for 2,000 years has been sitting there in the open saying there's an assumption that your good leaders will stray and go wrong. Remove from us that sorrow and sadness and rule over us, dear Lord. Lead us, you alone, with kindness and caring like a mother. That's rachamim in Hebrew. Rechem means womb, with righteousness and justice. Blessed are you, Adonai, the leader who loves righteousness and justice. It's sort of like a little operational reminder to leaders, you're going to stray, but you've got to turn around and be kind and motherly and righteous and just. Righteous and just are the tough edge. Kindness and motherly. Do you see these pairs? The rabbis don't mess around, right? In a place where there is no leader, the Talmud says, make yourself one. And we're seeing that. New leaders are being born every minute now. And the third prayer is a need to stand against evil. Now, when I wrote this prayer book, when I was the head of Brandeis Hillel, the Jewish day school system in the Bay Area, San Francisco and Marin, I felt that, I served about 1,000 parents and teachers, and then the students. The students wouldn't have a problem with this. I was worried that the parents would say, oh, how can you use the word evil? And this is what I came up with. I need two people to read this. One who will read this side and the other who will whisper and echo this side. You and I will all come out in this part. So anybody who wants to participate, unmute yourself. And I'd love a lead voice to do these, echoed by somebody else's voice here in a whisper. Okay, I got Betty. Do you want to be the whisperer? Heidi, do you want to be the may I or the whisperer? You have to unmute.
May I?
Okay. All right, here we go. So start us off, Betty.
When no one else is ready to take a stand against what is wrong in our world, may I have the vision.
You didn't unmute yourself. Hold on. You have to hit that little red thing. We'll do a take two once you hit that little red thing. There.
Yes.
Okay, so take it from the top, Betty. You can tell I was a director. Sorry, Scott. Oh, I love you all. I don't meditate. Go ahead.
Okay, when no one else is ready to take a stand against what is wrong in our world, may I have the vision.
Help, I may not be right.
May I have the strength.
Help, I may not be popular.
May I have the timing.
Help, should I do it now or later?
May I have the wisdom.
Help, I may not be the best person to do this.
May I have the courage.
Help, it would be easier if you stood with me.
Together to stand
Stand
up
up and
and
say,
say
no.
no. If I don't,
Who will?
No.
if I do,
If I do, I'll be the true leader.
True leader.
so that's again a kavanah that I wrote to encapsulate this idea. Listen to this, sitting in plain sight. Let there be no hope for those who are unkind and dishonest. You've heard of the prayer, the song Hatikva, the national anthem of Israel. The hope, that's what it means. Here's the same word, tikva. May there be no hope for those who are unkind and dishonest. Let evil thoughts and actions be no more. May all wrong actions be cut off. Yikaretu. May they be cut off. And those who don't care about goodness in this world, may they be without roots. May their ideas be crushed, chased away, finished off. May this happen quickly and in our time. There's an intolerance for people who are not listening to their angelic side, but live out their bestial side. It's ruggedly realistic. We don't hear that same voice in all religions equally, but this is interesting and worth reflecting when we're soul sick. But then nighttime comes slowly, as it is now. It looks promising. And then in the dark is when we really feel that we're damaged the most. I've had people calling me all week and the last month saying, I have this terrible feeling something's wrong going to happen. I know people who felt the same way before COVID was unfolding. They just had this soul sick feeling. And then I turn to what we can do in prayer. You saw some of those. Here's some other ideas. And this is all in daily prayer, not Shabbat. I make this point. Shabbat prayer, you're treating yourself like an angel, but your human dilemma, your existential loneliness, your existential cry for meaning happens in the day and the night, not on Shabbat when you're protected. So if you feel this, I encourage you to turn to Psalm 30. It's a psalm that's been there over 3,000 years, and it has a mantra in the middle of it. And the mantra basically reminds us that your sadness will turn to normalcy and gladness if you can make it to the morning. Hafachta misbedi, you have turned my eulogy to a song of happiness. And that's why we're told what you should do in the morning to restart your soul. You remember that each part is precious, and Rabbi Tarfon in Talmud also says, yeah, every part of you is important. Every single part may help somebody else. And then remember, the rabbi says, you are not called upon to complete the work, yet you are not free to avoid doing your part. You need a mantra. You can't fix it. Fix one aspect of your own life. It has an echo, a ripple effect. When the sun is rising, we get a little bit of hope, but notice it looks just like sunset. So we have that. The rabbis point out, you have this parallax view of potential and loss. The sun finally comes out, and the rabbis in the morning remind you, very tricky phrase here, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, the force of the universe, space and time, the one who forms light, Yotzer Or, Uvarei Choshech, and makes darkness. Oseh Shalom, the one who makes peace, Uvorei et Hakol, the one who creates all things. And if you look closely, this is the prayer that everybody sees in their prayer book. But if you look closely, you know there's something fishy, because in Isaiah, this prayer is adapted 2,000 years later by the rabbis, but it's taken from Isaiah, where it says, I am the Lord and there is none else. I form light and create darkness. Okay, check mark, good copy. And then it goes, oh, I make peace and create evil. I am the Lord and I do all these things. So the challenge theologically, if you strictly stick to Judaism, there is no external force of evil. It's embedded in us. And the rabbis didn't want to say it as bluntly as the Hebrew Bible did. The word evil does appear there. Here they said, and the one who creates all other things. It's a desperate attempt to keep idealistic under Roman domination. I think we can make it through this. But there is this existential loneliness when day breaks. But that's the opportunity. Somebody read this one. These are all little prayerful thoughts that might get you through the dark in the morning when you're waking. Somebody want to help me read?
I will.
Please, thank
Which
you.
one?
This one.
The world exists for the sake of the person who makes sacrifices of the soul for the benefit of the world.
And again, we can discuss these in a moment, but the rabbis are very clear. The world doesn't exist to hear my prayer about me or my folk. The world exists for the sake of the person who sacrifices that soul sickness on the benefit of the world. Somebody want to take this one? Again, this is the meditative quality of some of these great one-liners from the Talmud. The center, somebody?
The center of the world is exactly where you stand.
So there's nothing wrong, perhaps, with being a little narcissistic, because then you will assume, the rabbis believe, that you can actually fix part of this world. And when I see this president, who's a trained comedian, speaking truth to power, I don't want to overly poeticize it, but it sort of feels biblical. Everyone's saying David and Goliath, and everyone mentions separately that the president is Jewish. It's very, this is a tough war to watch. Can you imagine the Ukraine having a Jewish president? Anybody realize what the Ukraine was like over the last 200 years to Jews? There's a potential here that the evil side of humans can't tolerate. This country has a Jewish president who, if I don't want to dramatize it too much, he's acting like David, and told the Americans when they said we can get you a helicopter, we're real good at getting people out. He said, no, I don't need a ride. I need weapons. I mean, if that's not Jewish humor in action, and David with his smirk saying to his brothers who'd been sitting there and staring at the that the people from Gath, they're monsters, they're huge people. He comes out and goes, yeah, what's up, Doc? And knocks the guy out with a stone and a sling. The potential, if you know that the world does stand on you and with you. Things aren't calm in nature. And therefore a prayer can be, Adonai, teach me your way and lead me in an even path, not what we're going through now, because of my enemies. Don't let the bad guys watch me swerve. Don't hand me over to the will of my enemy. I put in here their bad thoughts, because people telling lies have come up against me and witness against me. And all of these false narratives that have just become part of the right and the left. This is what it's about. That's the potential that we all have. That's the potential. This is the light. This is the light. We know what darkness looks like. So by midday, the light's right up above. I'm going to end with this little reading, and then we'll have a few minutes, and then I have 1 minute for a prayer closure. Okay, Scott? Okay, so I like a storyteller, and I'll move this up as you go. This is a rabbinic tale. Again, it comes from, oddly enough, Sanhedrin, which should be a legal code. It has a lot of rich information in it. So this is about the Messiah, right? So maybe somebody out there is praying, maybe God will protect these people in a righteous battle. So somebody, storyteller, please. Janet.
Rabbi Joshua ben Levi met Elijah the prophet. He asked Elijah, "When will the Messiah come?" Elijah answered, "Go and ask him yourself." "Where is he?" "At the gates of the town."
That's like saying at the mall. You can see her. The rabbis are being, go ask him yourself. He said, go.
"How shall I recognize him?" "He's sitting among the poor lepers." The others unbind all the bandages of their sores at the same time, and then rebind them all together. But he unbinds them one sore at a time, and then binds it again before treating the next one, thinking to himself, "Perhaps I will be needed, and if so, I must not delay." Rabbi Joshua went to the Messiah and said, "Peace unto you, master and teacher." The Messiah answered, "Peace unto you, son of Levi." "When will you come, master?" asked Rabbi Joshua. "Today," came the answer. Rabbi Joshua returned to Elijah, who asked, "What did he tell you?" He spoke falsely to me," said Rabbi Joshua, "for he said he would come today, but he has not come." Elijah answered him, "This is what he told you. Today, if you will, but hearken to God's voice."
So for those of you who are soul sick or moved to sadness because of the illness, this nightmare that we're living through, and then compounded by war, only to be followed by fire and flood this summer, God help us. What do you think about what you heard? Does it help with the sickness? What other ideas do you use that hit you at night or like the sun in the middle of the day? This is the discussion part.
So maybe we can stop the recording and then have a chance for folks to